Have you ever wondered what happened to the women who fell in love with the fallen angels? Those who chose passion over obedience to God? This is the story of how these heavenly beings turned against heaven, and how the women who loved them paid the ultimate price. Their forbidden love gave birth to the Nephilim, giant offspring doomed to perish in a divine flood. And when judgment came, it wasn't just the children who faced consequences. Archangel Michael himself took action against the wives. What he did next will shock you. Their souls became the sirens of legend, haunting myths and stories to this day. It all began with a single, dangerous glance. Love at first sight gone terribly wrong. High in heaven, the angels were busy doing God's work, singing praises, managing the cosmos. Everything was in order, until they looked down. What they saw wasn't just earth, it was women. Beautiful, real human women. Something stirred within them. A longing they'd never known. Every glance made the pull stronger, their radiant glow dimmer. Their thoughts, once pure, were now filled with temptation. Meanwhile, the women on earth felt something too. Like they were being watched, chosen. The air around them was electric, like the calm before a storm. They had no idea celestial beings were breaking divine laws just to be near them. The angels wrestled with their purpose. Serve God or chase this new feeling? Day by day, more angels gave in. They questioned everything. What if they could feel what humans feel? What if they could love? Desires once unimaginable now consumed them. Heaven and earth were never meant to mix, but these divine warriors, who had stood at God's throne and witnessed stars being born, were willing to risk it all for love. They didn't know it yet, but their decision would set off a chain reaction that would shake the universe. When the angels finally stepped onto earth, something extraordinary happened, though not in a good way. Imagine the most beautiful person you've ever seen, then multiply that by 1,000. That's what they looked like. They didn't just walk, they glided. Their voices sounded like music. Their presence made everything else fade. People stopped and stared. Women felt drawn, enchanted. These weren't just handsome strangers, they were perfection. Glowing skin, starry eyes, mesmerizing smiles. But as the saying goes, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Because these weren't just stunning men. They were fallen angels. 5:25. They were angels who had turned their backs on heaven, and if you looked closely enough you could see something wasn't quite right. Their smiles held secrets darker than night. Their eyes, though beautiful, were ancient and deep in a way that no humans could be. The women who met them felt drawn in like moths to a flame. It wasn't fair, really. How do you say no to someone who literally glows with heavenly light, who knows everything about you before you even speak, who can promise you things no human man ever could? But here's the 603. Scary part: the more time these women spent with the fallen angels, the more they changed too. It's like they caught some of that otherworldly glow. They started seeing things differently. Normal life wasn't enough anymore. Regular men looked plain and boring compared to these heavenly beings. The fallen angels knew exactly what they were doing. They picked the most beautiful women, the ones who caught their eye from heaven. They used their heavenly powers to appear as everything these women had ever dreamed of. It was like a fairy tale, a love story with a horror twist. Every time one of these angels took a human wife, it sent shockwaves through both heaven and earth. These weren't ordinary marriages, they were forbidden unions. And the children born from them? That's where the real darkness began. These hybrid children were called the Nephilim. Imagine a baby being born, but instead of growing up normally, it just kept getting bigger and bigger until it towered like a mountain. These weren't average kids. They were giants with strength to move mountains and an appetite that could empty entire villages. When a Nephilim walked, the ground shook. When it spoke, its voice thundered. They carried the power of their angel fathers and the emotions of their human mothers, but none of the wisdom to control either. Imagine a toddler throwing a tantrum, but that toddler is the size of a house. Terrifying, right? Entire cities lived in fear of them. Ordinary people didn't stand a chance. The Nephilim took what they wanted, ate what they wanted, and destroyed anything in their path. Some were as tall as trees, others even taller. They weren't just huge, they were smart, and that made them even more dangerous. In heaven, God watched. His perfect world was being turned upside down by these creatures that were never meant to exist. His anger grew with each passing day, seeing how the Nephilim terrorized the humans he so deeply loved. That's when heaven's greatest warriors, Michael, Gabriel, and the other archangels, knew they had to act. But even for them, this would be no ordinary battle. Fighting a Nephilim was like fighting a force of nature. And there were so many of them. These weren't demons, they were beings with angelic blood. But here's the thing, when you have God on your side, you've got backup, big time. When the archangels saw that even they might not be enough, God decided to intervene himself, with a plan that would change the world forever. A great flood. one that would wash away all the evil spread across the earth. What followed was a battle like nothing the world had ever seen. Heaven's armies versus the mighty Nephilim. Lightning tore across the sky. Thunder shook the mountains. Rain fell in sheets as the great flood approached. For the first time, the Nephilim felt something they had never known: fear. It became clear to everyone, angels, humans, and Nephilim, that some boundaries should never have been crossed, no matter how tempting the reason. Have you ever seen storm clouds gather so thick it turns day into night? Multiply that by 1,000,000. That's how it began when God decided enough was enough. The sky didn't just darken, it turned black. The air became so heavy it was hard to breathe. At first, people didn't worry. Rain was normal. But this was different. The raindrops were thick and heavy, like heaven itself was weeping. They didn't just fall, they slammed down hour after hour, day after day without stopping. The mighty Nephilim, who once struck fear into everyone, now looked terrified. These giants, who could crush boulders with their bare hands, were powerless against the rising waters. They tried to climb the highest mountains, but the water kept rising higher. Their strength meant nothing now. Nature itself had turned on them. The screams echoed across the earth, people begging for mercy, crying out to heaven. The fallen angels watched helplessly as their children, these powerful beings they had brought into the world, struggled in the flood. But there was nothing they could do. This was God's judgment, and no power in heaven or earth could stop it. In the middle of this chaos, one boat floated above the rest: Noah's Ark. Imagine being on that ark, hearing the storm rage outside, the waves tossing the boat like a toy. Inside were the only humans and animals who would survive this global reset. They heard the cries from those outside, but they couldn't help. This was God's plan, and they had to trust it. The water kept rising, covering everything. The flood kept rising, first covering the fields, then the forests, then the hills. Even the tallest mountains vanished beneath the endless waves. The Nephilim, those mighty giants who once seemed unstoppable, were now just one more thing for the flood to sweep away. Their immense strength couldn't save them from drowning. The fallen angels could only watch, chained and powerless, as everything they had built, everything they had loved, disappeared under the water. Their perfect children, their human wives, the cities they helped raise, all gone. The world they had corrupted was being wiped clean. For 40 days and 40 nights, rain poured from the sky. And when it finally stopped, the earth was just a vast, endless ocean. No mountains, no valleys, no cities. Just water as far as the eye could see. The only sign of life was Noah's Ark, floating alone across the great flood waters. When the waters finally started to recede, a completely changed world began to emerge. Everything the Nephilim had built was erased. It was like God had hit a reset button on the earth. But for some, especially the wives of the fallen angels, an even worse punishment was about to begin. You'd think the flood was the worst part, but for these women, it was only the beginning. Remember those women who fell in love with the fallen angels? They survived the flood, but maybe survival wasn't the blessing it seemed to be. Imagine loving someone with your whole heart, someone powerful, radiant, and divine, only to watch them dragged away in chains. That's what happened to these women. Their angelic husbands, once majestic and strong, were now imprisoned. Some chained deep in dark valleys, others locked away in spiritual prisons. They couldn't help their wives anymore. They couldn't hold them, protect them, or even speak to them. The women were left behind to face the consequences. Some were crushed by guilt, falling to their knees and begging God for forgiveness. They wept until they had no tears left. But not all of them felt remorse. Take Naamah, for example, beautiful, proud, and defiant. Even after everything, she refused to repent. She had reveled in her beauty and power, using them to lead others astray. And even now, she stood tall, unwilling to admit she was wrong. Her pride became her prison. God's punishment? Brutal and poetic. These women were turned into sirens, those mythical creatures that lure sailors to their doom. Beautiful but deadly. Just like the angels they had loved. Forever cursed to draw others into destruction, just as they had once been drawn. The psychological toll was overwhelming. The guilt of helping bring about the end of the world was too much to bear. Some went mad from grief. Others became hollow versions of who they once were. And the fallen angels, chained in darkness, could feel every moment of their wives' suffering. Their pain, their despair, their madness, it echoed through the spiritual realm. But they could do nothing. That was their punishment. Eternal regret. Meanwhile, the angels who had remained loyal to God were given a new mission: to watch over this newly cleansed earth. Their job was to ensure nothing like this ever happened again. They watched as humanity tried to rebuild, as the sirens sang their haunting songs from afar. They saw the scars left behind even in a world washed clean. And they stayed silent. They had learned their lesson. Some boundaries are never meant to be crossed, no matter how tempting the reason. But here's something that'll blow your mind. There was a moment hidden in a 3,000-year-old scripture, when two of the most powerful beings in all creation clashed. Michael and Lucifer. And what were they fighting over? Moses' body. Yes, the same Moses who parted the Red Sea. But this wasn't some ordinary fight. It was so intense, so significant that most people don't even know it happened. The Bible briefly mentions it, but the real story is deeper, darker, and more mysterious than you could imagine. Want to know what made Michael so furious that he had to confront Lucifer himself? Or why Lucifer wanted Moses' body so badly? Click the video that just popped up on your screen. What happened next changed everything we thought we knew about heaven's greatest warrior and its most infamous traitor. This is one Bible story they definitely didn't teach you in Sunday school.